So I apologize about that. The garbage man had to come to the door there. This is The Question, a radio broadcast brought to you by Blog Talk Radio. I'm Doug Pagitt, your host. We're going to give him a tip right now. You're going to give him a tip? Yeah. Okay. You can keep that door open or close it? Or?
What do you want?
Could you close that because the trucks come by and it gets really noisy. This is live radio, people. This is radio and video all at the same time. That's natural health coach Shelly Pagitt will be joining us in 9 minutes. So apparently we were supposed to call the garbage company and say, look, we need to have an extra pickup because we had a bunch of stuff left over from this party that we had. Right? So there was the graduation party, and there was some other stuff from cleaning out the garage that we had to do because we're having the party over here that's out there. So the garbage man came to the door and he goes, hey, did you call for an extra pickup on all that stuff? And I said, no, I don't know if my wife called or not. I don't know if we did. Should we? He goes, well, it's more than I'm supposed to take. Shelly goes out there, comes back in about 20 seconds later and said, we're just going to give him a tip. So you're the garbage guy. Instead of setting up an extra pickup that the company makes the money, he's like, hey, throw a little my way and I'll take care of you. So thank you, garbage man. Thank you for taking care of it. Appreciate it. Anyway, Cindy Sheehan's protesting Bush again. Some things never seem to change. Hey, the other day I was listening to Fresh Air with Terry Gross, who I've asked to come be a guest on this show. Just moments ago, asked her to come be a guest host. So keep your eyes and ears open because Terry Gross just might be showing up over here on The Question, Blog Talk Radio conversation with me, Doug Pagitt, your host, Tuesdays all summer long. But anyway, I was listening to this show on Fresh Air as I do and appreciated it greatly, and said to and heard this little segment, and in the segment it was a linguist, and it was a linguist who is a linguist at the University of California, Berkeley, and he was talking about all his stuff in his book, and then they got into this conversation about people who correct others based on their using poor grammar. And he has this great little shtick on it. So it's about 3 minutes long. I thought it was worth listening to, so I'd like you to hear it. So this is a fellow named Jeff, and I was going to write down his last name, and then I didn't. I apologize, but it'll come at the end of the segment. So this is Jeff. He's a linguist, and Terry Gross starts out the interview with him about his I guess junior high teacher.
In your new book, Jeff, you mention one of your English teachers in I guess it was in high school, Mrs. Bosch, who was like really a stickler for correcting grammatical errors and things like that. Was that helpful or just irritating?
I think everybody has to have an English teacher like Mrs. Bosch if you want to learn to write well. Mrs. Bosch is the English teacher who, with withering sarcasm, dismisses all the errors and grammatical solecisms in her students' papers. So somebody has the misfortune to write, having been thrown in the air, the dog caught the stick, or something like that, and Mrs. Bosch is the one who says, the poor dog being thrown in the air like that, and you're in 7th grade or 8th grade, and you laugh. You're being let in on this secret. So you have to have a teacher like that. And then at some point later in life, you have to renounce her and then finally forgive her. And that's the point at which you become, let me say, a mature speaker of English. And the trouble is that a lot of people kind of never get over that moment. They're the people who write comments on any blog entry or newspaper article that involves grammar, going on sarcastically about someone else's use of language. And the sarcasm that people apply to language is really something that they learn in 7th grade and kind of never overcome. It's what's wrong with the way people think about language nowadays.
Well, why is it wrong? Because the people who do that, and I've been the target of many corrections over the years. The people who do that think, A, they're doing you a favor, and B, they're right, and therefore they almost have an obligation to let you know that you've made a mistake. So what do you think is the problem and the motivation?
Well, I don't think the motivation is merely to inform someone else. That can be done when it's appropriate, and it usually isn't. But when it's appropriate, it can be done graciously without sarcasm. The sarcasm comes when, I don't know, somebody writes in broad daylight and somebody says, why, could there have been narrow daylight? And it's this adolescent way of congratulating yourself on having mastered the elements of English grammar when you were 13. And it's kind of stupid because the things you learn at 13, while they're the basics, are hardly the source of should hardly be the source of enormous self-esteem. I mean, if it's really a source of self-esteem for you that you know the correct rules for using the apostrophe, maybe you should get out more.
and this is coming from a linguist. Well, Jeff, great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
It's great to talk with you. Thank you.
Jeffrey Nunberg's new book is called The Years of Talking Dangerously. Jeff is a linguist who teaches at the School of Information of the University of California at Berkeley, and he's chairman emeritus of the usage panel of the American Heritage Dictionary.
I mean, isn't that fabulous? He's like the guy who writes the usage dictionary, and he says, you know, if you find it a sense of enormous pride that you know the rules of how to use an apostrophe, maybe you need to get out a little more. I listen in the car because look, I get it all the time. I live with a wife who thinks it's hysterical if someone mispronounces a word and brings it up all the time. Now she doesn't do a whole lot of, you know, like sarcasm and pride. She just corrects people like I do when the president uses the wrong article in front of a noun, when he uses the improper "an" instead of an "a," or, you know, he always uses an "a" instead of an "an." Like, I ate an apple. He says stuff like that. It's not quite that bad, but it's just about that bad, and it kind of drives me crazy. So I get it, and I say stuff to people around me. But I'm more often than not, I'm the one on the receiving end of the immature comments about people's grammar and word choice selections. I mean, I make up words. In fact, I was in a conversation with a guy, a preaching professor at a seminary in Texas, just this last spring, and I've made up a word in my book, in my book called Preaching Reimagined. And I made up this word where I combined the word preaching, which is a church act, and the word speech, like giving a speech, speech making. And I combined the two together, preaching spelled Preaching, of course, and speeching. And I call it, and a speech, and I call it speeching, spelled SPEA, you know, CKING. So I'm doing this thing where I'm mixing these words up to try to make a point that when pastors do this. Anyway, the preaching professor there says, we're talking about the ideas of the book, and he said, hey, I've got a question for you. How come you had to make up a word, speeching? Why did you have to do that? Aren't there enough words already? Why do people have to keep making up words? And I was just taken, I'm like, seriously? You don't think we should still invent words? He said, yeah, there's 100,000 in the dictionary or whatever. I think that's plenty. Not around here, people. I don't think it's plenty at all. I don't think it's nearly enough. Hey, this is The Question, a Blog Talk Radio conversation. With me, Doug Pagitt, sometimes all by myself, sometimes you calling in. Shelley Pagitt is going to join us in a minute. She will be sitting right over there in that chair. And she will be on the video feed, and she will be chiming in with all the rest of us here momentarily. Welcome to The Question, a Blog Talk Radio conversation with me, Doug Pagitt, your host, Tuesdays all summer long.